The Zoom ladies' dulcet tones tell us we are indeed recording and we are in progress. Cinemaflix Music Picks, hosting most speeds released, yada yada. I'm Davy. You know that stuff. I regurgitate it every time. You know Ryan as well, hopefully, because he's been on before and I'm at his gaff quite a bit. So, you should know Ryan. Ryan from Ryan's Final Destination. Hello, Ryan. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
Fine. That's the pleasantries part of the video out of the way, folks. So credit to Ryan, because not only is he the one that makes me look better on his channel, but he was the one that said, you know what you should do? You know what you should do? Well, first of all, I had some really nasty ideas, but I had to throw them out. It said, you know what you should do? A cinema flick and a music picking one. Just make some reviews. And I said, you first. And he said, well, I'll do it with you. So here we are. So the theme of it is that, as per usual on here, there's no theme. So we're just going to review stuff we want to talk about, basically. And we're going to start, Ryan, with an album. Do you want to tell folks what album we're starting with, as if they cannot read the comments?
Highland Hard Rain by Aztec Camera from 1982.
Yeah,
It says 82, 83 on here.
Yeah, it came
So
out in
maybe,
83. Yeah.
yeah.
So because I saw the 30th anniversary tour in 2013 something. Fuck them if they lied to us on a CD cover. Fuck them. So 83 was Highland's Hard Rain, and it was the debut album by Roddy Frame's Aztec Camera, which they may as well be called because it is indeed Roddy's band. There was no musicians who carried over throughout the lifespan of it. It was always Roddy's project and whatever he wanted it to be. They started out on Postcard Records in Glasgow, a label who launched Joseph Kay and the Go-Betweens, Orange Juice with Edwyn Collins, quite a few acts, and then they moved on to Rough Trade for this record, this debut album, and it was the only album they recorded for Rough Trade. We'll get into that in a bit. Ryan, this was, I believe, well, not a particular listen, but recently it's been your first experience with this album, I believe.
Yeah, a few months ago, I would say, probably at this point.
Yeah, back in the start of the summer, probably a bit then. Do you want to talk us through it? Do you want to just give us your thoughts or so?
Yeah. So I really dig this album quite a bit. Mostly because of like the fact that it is really a mix of sounds. I mean, you have a lot of jangly pop type of stuff on it with the bright guitars, the kind of like melancholy vocal melodies and stuff. Roddy, he kind of has a very I don't know, his voice almost kind of reminds me of Morrissey a tiny bit. Not that they're like exactly the same, but the way they phrase words and stuff.
Yeah, and he came out first.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is an early record. I think this had to have been a pretty influential record to come out 83, be recorded in 82. The fact that it came out that early, I think shows how ahead of the curve it was. I mean, REM was just getting started at that point. These guys were getting started. The Smiths hadn't really started. I don't think Replacements had started yet, right?
No.
So yeah, these guys were ahead of the curve. So like I said, you got some jangle pop type of stuff on it. You have just straight up alternative, little bit of new wavy type of stuff on it, especially some of the tracks that have a bit more of like a digital drum sound to them. And then also some jazzy stuff. And that's actually my favorite stuff on the record. Like for me, the highlight tracks on this album are Walk Out to Winter, Release, and Back on Board. Those are my three favorites on here. And they're like the really jazzy sounding type of tracks. You have a great guitar tone on this entire album, but especially on those as they're doing those jazzy chords. The song Release, especially when I first heard this album, it just made me turn my head like, whoa, they went
Yeah,
there.
yeah. That
'Cause I mean,
you wouldn't get Morrison doing that.
no, not at all. And I mean, the album is kind of like a bit all over the place stylistically because you do have moments like that, but I'd say that everything fits cohesively still, even though it is a variable album. Like it doesn't feel like they can really sit still with one style, yet they all made each style Aztec Camera's version of that. So it never feels like a scattered album. It just feels these guys like a lot of different music and they could do it. Obviously, Oblivious is a great opening track. Couple others I really, really, really liked on here would be We Could Send Letters. Thought that was a cool kind of poppy alternative type of song. I liked Down the Dip quite a bit. Lost Outside the Tunnel. But like I said, my three favorites are Walk Out to Winter, Release, and Back on Board. I think some of the best positives, like I said, the guitar sound is beautiful. I do like Roddy's voice quite a bit. Um, I think that if it wasn't in the right context, the way he sings on this could be seen as kind of over singing, but I think it works very well for the style. Like I think at times the way he enunciates the words and stuff goes on a bit longer, which is where I kind of said that Morrissey type of thing in the way they phrase things. I like it. I think in a different band it might not work, but I think it fits this band's tone perfectly. I think the only thing that I would say I have any kind of negative thought with the album at all would be some of the production. I think aspects of it are very dated at this point, but it's an album from 1983. But I think some of the drum sounds are a little too digital sounding at time on it. Whereas other songs, it does sound more authentic and stuff. So I think there's a little bit of variation there with the drum sounds, or at least it's more subtle on other tracks than some of them. But that would be my main thing. I mean, like I said, I think the guitar is beautiful. I think it is a very bright sounding album. You don't really have a ton of like low end on it, which is very cool for the style of the music it is, because even though it is melancholy, it does feel a little bit euphoric with how bright it sounds and kind of happy, even though there is sadness in it as well. But yeah, I'd say that would be my little, I guess, brief little Wall Street Journal kind of review of the album. I think it's really solid stuff. It is one that I know I'll be listening to a lot more. I mean, every time I've listened to it since I first picked it up, I've liked it a little more than the time before. Today, rating wise, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I don't think it's a perfect album, but I think that for a debut from people, for someone as young as Roddy was at the time, wasn't he like 16 or something at the time
He
this
was
album got
18
made?
when he recorded it. When he wrote some of the songs, he was 15.
Yeah. Okay. So he was really young. And I mean, it's a real accomplished effort. I think the songwriting's fresh. There's a lot of good sounding stuff on it. I think other than some of the production, I think it's an album that could get released now and be pretty well received. You know, I think that it's a style of like alternative music that hasn't really died for people who like that genre of music. Like I think it still sounds very of contemporary other than some of the production, but the production's a small thing too. It doesn't really bug me too much because the songwriting and performances are so good on it. Yeah, I mean, I'd highly recommend the album. I think that it's one that maybe a lot of people in America haven't checked out. I don't think it's an overly popular album. I mean, I looked at them on YouTube. They only have like 5,000 subscribers as a band. So like they're not, they're obviously not a household name for many. Um, and some of these songs were only getting like 2,000 views and stuff. And they've been out for like years and years. So obviously a little bit obscure. Although Oblivious, I think, had like 90,000 views on it, something like that.
Yeah. That was as close to a hit single as they had on this album.
Yeah. So couple songs got a little bit of traction, but even 90,000 views isn't really that much in terms of a band. So if you haven't heard of them, I'd recommend checking them out. I think it's a really good album. I've kind of purposely not really dove too far into the rest of the catalog. Just in case we do any in the future, I kind of want to have a little air of surprise. I wanted to kind of dive into this album and not be too influenced by what comes after, whether better or worse. I don't know how they could do much better than this one, though, other than production, because the songs are amazing on here.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Fantastic. Thank you. Brilliant. So, Aztec Camera in this country, a bit like a decade later with the Britpop kind of scene, people will know the name Aztec Camera, even if they don't know, maybe somebody younger doesn't know the actual name, they would know their massive hit single from later in the 80s from their third album, Somewhere in My Heart, which was that a UK number one? It was certainly one or two. And that was a huge hit single. And it sounds like nothing on here. It's like a pure white-eyed soul song with a modern take on that kind of Smokey Robinson big sound, which so different to anything on here. And Roddy's voice sounds totally different again, because he's an adult then. He's not a boy who's doing his best to be an adult. So here's my copy of the Rough Trade Anniversary Edition that came out for the 35th. And you got this. You got a signed EP from Roddy, although he's not very good at writing. For a good songwriter, can't really scroll very well. It comes with the original Rough Trade EP replica of that and stuff, which is really cool. Which is what they had back in the day. So it's an interesting album. It's a fascinating album, really, because to me it's one of the best debut albums to come out during that period. And we're about to cover another 1983 Scottish band's debut album over with Grant and Grant and Schrock Warehouse. They came out within a couple of months of each other. Big Country's The Crossing and this. So rather exciting time for kind of Scottish alternative music in one scene. So debut album, was it 10 tracks? And as you say, stylistically, it goes all over the place. And Roddy writes every single one of the tracks on here. No co-writes. He does absolutely everything. We Could Send Letters, which has got some of those mature lyrics on the record he wrote when he was 15. In his own words, he'd barely started having fun with himself, never mind having fun with other people. So Roddy was a real schoolboy when he was writing some of this stuff, which is just remarkable to me. You mentioned Oblivious as the kickoff, and that is the quintessential, we're going to start off with some jangle pop. It's much more vibrant and much more upbeat. And by his own admission, Roddy wrote it as an intent to go on to Top of the Pops, which would break you if you did right. Here's the EP single, which is, you get two records. I don't think this was a thing in America, but we used to get like double singles, so you get two singles in one to make up an EP rather than just one 10-inch. You'd get two 45s, which is kind of dated concept, but pretty cool. And then it would come in a little gatefold single sleeve. But Roddy wanted to write something that would crack him So Oblivious was his most obvious attempt, he thought, to get him over that hump. He didn't have a particular love for Jangle Pop. He liked listening to it, but he didn't have a particular love for making it. His heart was much more originally, as you can imagine, for somebody born in '64, into punk. But he hated where punk was going by the late '70s, as a lot of people did. It was starting to become very sellout. They were starting to work with the same megastar producers that had produced prog acts and things, and they were starting to become, shells of themselves in a lot of cases. They burnt out just as fast. Ever get the feeling you've been cheated indeed, Mr. Lydon? So Roddy had become quite disenchanted with a lot of the music that he loved when he was writing these songs. So stylistically, he changed them as he started thinking about how he can actually record them. So he went into the studio, recruited the band bit by bit, replaced them, even before they became famous. He replaced them until he got the exact sound. He's a bit Brian Wilson in that regard. He has the sound in his head, and anything has to be done to achieve that sound. He'll do it. Probably didn't wear a fireman's helmet and have a sand bucket in his room, but whatever. You don't get those in His Bride. But Roddy started moving away from punk and even post-punk, and started really playing guitar, which he thought, if I can just find out how to play all these different styles, then I'll never be limited again. And as you said, you can really see that in this album, because stylistically, it goes all over the place, but it never feels like it goes too far all over the place. It never feels like, that doesn't follow that. What are you doing here, mate? It never feels like, this feels like a bunch of singles put together or a few EPs smashed together. Oblivious is an attempt to have a pop hit, but God forbid you should want to have a hit when you're 18 years old and trying to have a successful career in music. You go into This Boy Wonders, which is another great song. That's where we get our title track, or our title rather. Walk Out to Winter, as you said, is one of the cool jazziest intro parts. But then it's not terribly jazzy in the choruses, because as you say, that's when we start to get some of the electronic drum sounds that because Walk Out to Winter, with that walk out to winter, I swear I'll be this, nice breezy jazz. And then in the choruses, when it starts with the chill will wake you, it's like high and dry. Okay. They're not big enough to have one of these big fucking Stephen Wilson's coming in and reassess the catalogue, but like that is one case where I wish that could happen, is just take the drum sounds out, because it tints a couple of the tracks. It doesn't taint them. I'm not even going to go that far, so I'll drop the A and just say tints them a little bit. But yeah, the bugle sounds again fantastic. But I mean, my favorite song from all of the Aztec Camera records, not that there's that many, is We Could Send Letters. I think it's just one of the most majestic tracks, with the most some of the production on that, even though it's got, the drums are back, folks. The production on that chorus, when it just goes up and up and up and up, every single line, it just seems to ascend and ascend. We go, just close your eyes, and then up again until these things get better. And then the female backing vocalists come in, which again is something that he's going to follow up on when he's got much more of a soulful sound in future albums. So it takes this kind of indie pop rock that would be quite synonymous with this scene in the 80s and alternative, but then it kind of had some soul to it as well, and some swing. You just don't associate with that, it's got some, there's again, jazziness. You don't get that with the Smiths. You don't get that with Echo and the Bunnymen. And plus, he's also, it's probably worth mentioning, Roddy does play all the lead guitar on this as well. He plays every bit of guitar. So it's not like Morrissey is the front man or Ian McCulloch is the front man, and then Johnny Marr's playing guitar. Roddy is doing the songwriting, the singing, and he's coming up with all the guitar parts and how to play them. And he plays a different guitar on every track here, which he wanted to do intentionally to give it a different feel. And I think that does come across, actually, especially in some of those jazzier moments that you're saying. Because what you want on your Oblivious hit is not what you want on some of your jazzier moments, which... What a great idea to have apparently he spent all his money, like he had no money at all. Like, he was just a kid, he'd never had a job, and he was beg, stealing, borrowing to try and get decent guitars so he could do this. He just had this idea in his head, no, I need to get the right guitar if I want to do this kind of jazzy sound. I can't just do it on the same one that would get me through playing a pub gig. But Pillar to Post is another great pop song, which I think is a great release from We Could Send Letters, which is actually quite a dark track thematically. We Could Send Letters, but Pillar to Post, wow. Once I was happy in happy extremes. Again, he's someone who's able to come up with these great pop hooks, and then when you read the lyrics, it's all quite dark. It's all quite angsty teenage stuff, which again, I think people would have been able to latch on to, as you say, in a lot of alternative scenes. And over there, I'd imagine college radio kind of scenes more than anything else, rather than, I don't think they've ever been an MTV act, but I could certainly see a kind of alternative college radio scene for them. Mm-hmm. Release, as you say, wow, the minute that hits in, it's like, what is this? The first time you hear it, it's like, this is just this lovely acoustic guitar playing. And he's already played stuff like flamenco guitar on We Could Send Letters and done that brilliantly. And now he's into kind of jazz guitar. And it almost sounds, as you said, he sings sometimes in quite a thick Scottish accent. Not too thick, but you're right, he does. You can tell it's not somebody from Scranton. I don't know why I picked Scranton. It's always my go-to example. But he's somebody with a thick accent who's trying to tone it down a bit and not always succeeding. So even when he says the word release, it sounds sometimes like he's saying Louise or something. He's going like, release, like, it's like he's having to tone down the East Kilbride accent, which I can really identify with, having to tone down your accent for people overseas. But it's a terrific track as well. And it also shows his love of that kind of pulp fiction, not the Tarantino, but the actual idea of Pulp Fiction, because it's a kind of Dashiell Hammett story when he's singing about all I could get to was a gun or a girl. It's almost a film noir set to music with a jazzy soundtrack, as a lot of film noir as well, which I just love. So again, ties into cinema, flicks, and music picks. We don't go through everything, but Back on Board, such a great track as well. The production on that is where it really starts to skyrocket for me, and it just goes up and up. Those backing singers come back in; they're absolutely wonderful. It's a combination of the production of the whole album, and to go out on that, what do? You do a solo acoustic number. It segues straight into Down the Dip, and the Dip's the name of the local pub. So when he was singing about going down the dip, we're going down the pub afterwards. But it sounds like it means something much more poetic than that when he's singing like, and I'm going down the dip with you. It doesn't sound like he's just saying, we'll go to the pub after work. It sounds much more romantic than that, but it's good. It's gorgeous. Again, for just him and his acoustic guitar, it's absolutely great. When he's singing and I'm holding my ticket, you can kind of hear that he does have that knowledge of Django pop, but he's also got a good knowledge of kind of singer-songwriter stuff that he could be doing as well. And to me, it's just the start of a terrific career. And look at that back picture of him. I mean, he's a schoolboy. I mean, he's just a schoolboy. It's nuts. But wow, to make a debut album like this. And then anyone who's interested, first of all, there's the single for Walk Out to Winter as well. which is nice. After this, Roddy got frustrated because he reckoned that he just made this terrific record, and Rough Trade said, "Hey, Roddy, we've just sold 4,000 records in Germany in the first month. Fantastic, well done." He said, "What do you mean only 4,000 records?" Like, he's looking at other people that are selling 50,000 and saying, "Why, you know?" He wasn't disappointed about selling the 4,000. He was more upset that Rough Trade were excited about the 4,000, because that kind of told them they don't have the ambition that I've got. So he said, "Cheerio," and off he went and signs up to Warner's for the rest of the Aztec camera catalog, the Warner years, and everything they do after that is compiled on this, the WEA recordings. This is every Aztec camera. Once you have that CD that you have there at the debut, and this, that is the complete Aztec camera, because they did everything at Warner's. And straight away, the next album, Knife, is produced by Mark Knopfler. So you know, you're going right up a level straight away again. So although that first record was a top 20 record, and it had a couple of singles that pushed them on the edge of success, it did have a lot of influence, and it was noticed by people like Mark Knopfler. And in the liner notes for this, he's quite, Roddy's always very brutally honest, and talks about how he didn't get on very well with Mark Knopfler, but he would always go home every night and think, "God, I learned so much today." And then they would argue the next day again. And then he would go home and go, "I'm glad we had that argument," because he learned so much from the arguments, much more than just agreeing with everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, fantastic. And what a career, because only 5 albums here, and then three solo records. And very sporadically, he will do a couple of live shows, normally in Scotland, and that's it. He doesn't tour. He doesn't make records on demand. He's done in total less than 10 records in 42 years of a career, which, you know, I'll take that, because they're fantastic records. None of them are bad records. So, and to see him live is quite a treat. Unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever tour America, but the anniversary tour where they did that album in its entirety, it was brilliant. He was talking about the inspirations for each track. It was making fun of the lack of success. He only did 4 dates on that tour. It was 2 in London, 1 in Glasgow, and 1 in Scranton. I'm constantly using Scranton as an example. I just like the word Scranton. We don't have a Scranton over here. So he moves on to become something of a cult icon, and then has one massive hit single later in the 80s with "Somewhere in My Heart" from the album Knife. So it's a fantastically brief career, considering he's still under 60. He could do quite a bit more, but I don't know. I'm just grateful that he exists in the first place, and he's given us such wonderful music, including his first record. So you give it a 9. I'm going to look past the drum effects, because this album has always meant so much to me, and I'm just going to give it a straight 10, because I love Roddy Frame. I love Aztec Camera. Well, to be honest, to love Aztec Camera is to love Roddy Frame. It's so one and the same. But yeah, phenomenal debut. So 19 out of 20 between us there, so not too bad for Roddy. So yeah, I think that just a bit covers our thoughts on that then, unless you have any final closing remarks on how I know.
I think I wrapped it up pretty well. I mean, it was a pleasant surprise, that album. I'll probably be grabbing that box set in the near future.
The good thing is it's 9 discs. And you get loads of live stuff, and you get, like I've told you before, about his cover of Van Halen's "Jump," where it slows it down into a slow blues, which turns it into a kind of suicide song, telling somebody, you know, just go ahead and jump. You know, it is brilliant. It's hilarious. But then other covers like Dylan's "Threw It All Away," which unfortunately he doesn't do in the Nashville Skyline voice. So, you know, sorry, Roddy, you lost out there. I threw it all away. So that would have been a #1 record if Roddy had done it in that voice. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we have wrapped that segment up, and we're going to just jump straight in to a cinema flick from a music pick. Ryan, what did we go for? Oh, you got it already. So that's the film from 1970. They've missed some vowels out there. That is. Tell us what it is, Ryan. If you can compose
Well,
yourself, you come on, be professional.
well, is a movie about a radio station, and it stars Michael Brandon as a guy named Jeff, who is the director, I guess, of the studio at this point.
Yeah,
He's
station
kind of the bot.
manager. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty laid back guy, not really much of a leader, but it's kind of about him and the station standing up to corporate assholes who were trying to make them change who they are, essentially. And we go through a bunch of other subplots too, like kind of romances and people's frustrations with the channel. And we get live shows from Linda Ronstadt and what's that guy's name? Jimmy Buffett.
Jimmy Buffett, and then
Yeah.
we get a live sit down from Tom Petty.
Yeah. And REO Speedwagon's in
Yeah,
the movie too.
yeah.
So I mean it's a pretty star-studded cast. Oh yeah, Dolores Deluxe.
Mhm.
And you know, it's most known for its soundtrack, which features artists like Steely Dan with the theme song. Oh yeah, Cleavon Little is the Prince of Darkness. Um, who else is in here?
Eileen Brennan.
Yeah, Eileen Brennan. She plays Mother. Some other musicians. You've got Player with the song "Baby Come Back." You got Boz Scaggs. You've got tons and tons of musicians in this movie. And I actually think the soundtrack did really well. It sold over 1 million records, and it won a Grammy in 1979 for best recorded non um, non-classical soundtrack. So it did pretty well in that regard too. Um, let's see here. Oh yeah, you got like Steve Miller, Bob Dylan, and Bob Seger, Foreigner, Randy Meisner, the Eagles, Boston, playing Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Hey, because they're the same song, folks.
Some Billy Joel, Doobie Brothers, Joe Walsh, James Taylor, Queen, in a very memorable sequence at the end. Yeah, you got tons of music in here. Should I just go right into my review?
No.
Okay, well, I'm still going to anyways.
Okay.
I have mixed feelings about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I don't think it's a very good movie, but I like it.
Yes. Yes.
That's where it's at for
Yes.
me. I mean, it's honestly a pretty terrible film, if I'm going to be completely honest. I think it would have served as a much better sitcom. And obviously we saw WKRP in Cincinnati come out later on, or not even much later on. It was like same year, I think, actually.
Yeah.
But I think that this would have done really well with that kind of thing, with the same characters, with the same cast. I think there's a lot of stories in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And at times it gets kind of scattered for me,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you have like 20 minutes of the movie just being live footage of Jimmy Buffett and Linda Ronstadt too. So that takes up a lot of time. So otherwise they fit a lot of stuff into this movie, whether it's the main story about like the corporate people kind of trying to take over, or it's Eric, who's played by Martin Mull.
Mm-hmm.
His stuff, his kind of like, yeah, some of his debauchery he takes part in, and then also some of his sadness as this one girl he really cared for quit the station and stuff. You know, you have some other romantic stuff. You have Mother who's thinking of leaving the station, just kind of done. She's been doing it for a while, just ready to go and stuff. They don't want to see her go. You have all these things, and they're all good. But I feel like sometimes either, oh, you have this stoner Marine guy who's
Mm-hmm.
wants them to play like crappy country music and stuff.
Who is Stacy Keach's brother, James Keach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
James Keach, yeah. Um, I mean, he's great. A lot of those storylines are great. And that's almost why I feel like this show, I mean, this might have done better as a sitcom. It would have given some of this stuff a bit more room to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in an hour and 44-minute movie where 20 minutes is live footage, it's literally a concert in the middle of the movie. Either you feel like some of the scenes go too long for the amount of time, or they feel like, you know, because you'll have like two of the subplots, they'll pick up where they were at, and then you'll come back to the main plot, and then you're kind of like, wait, what's happening again? Because you just spent like a half hour away from it, basically. So pacing is an issue in this movie. I'd say the writing in general is an issue. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, one thing about the movie is it's honestly not a very funny movie. Like, I think that probably meant was kind of shown to be kind of a comedy movie, but I don't think it's very funny, honestly, at all. I mean, there's a couple parts like that Marine like smoking weed and just being weird and stuff. I think that's probably the funniest scene you get in the movie, but I think so it's not very funny. But I think where this movie really shines is the characters. I think they're all pretty well acted. I mean, Michael Brandon's not like an Oscar winning actor, but I think he's very likable in the movie. He's almost kind of purposely bland at times, but also very charismatic at the same time. He has like a weird balance between kind of being a bit monotone, but also being really charming. And I think it works well for his character. I think Martin Mull is kind of the star of the show for me. I think he is probably the funniest character. I mean, there's a scene where he's like crying on the air and he's just talking about like caressing the girl's breasts and stuff just on the air, and they're like freaking out and stuff, and they're all like, what are we gonna do and stuff. And but then you see Michael Brandon's character Jeff go in, and we don't hear what they're saying at all. But you just see their facial expressions, and that's great. And then they hug, and that's one of the best moments. I think that, and I think that honestly is one of the scenes that will negate what I feel. I feel like if this movie didn't have such a good soundtrack, a lot of the scenes wouldn't hit as emotionally as they do. But that scene's one of the exceptions, because I think just on its own, that's really, really well done. It's almost like movie we actually talked about, kind of related to Michael Brandon, but not directly. Bird with the Crystal Plumage. The scene where we see the girl getting murdered, or we think getting murdered through the glass, but we also hear the main character through the glass. We never really hear what's going on and stuff. Kind of a similar thing there, because we're seeing them through the glass of the studio as they're talking. So I think that's pretty cool. But the music, I mean, that scene where they have Baby Come Back by Player when he finds out that the girl quit, fantastic. And I actually do think the music definitely heightens that, but I think Martin Mull's facial expressions also sell that scene so well. I mean, you could really see the sadness on his face there. I think that Cleavon Little is really funny in the movie, but he is underutilized. I mean, he's barely in the movie. especially for as good of an actor he is, and how as good of a comedic actor he is as well. But it is really funny at the beginning where he's ready to leave and
Oh,
stuff, and
yes, yes.
Michael Brandon has to rush over to the station. He's got like cops behind him and stuff, and it's just running in the shit basically, trying
And
to get there on
you can
time.
you can tell this has happened a few times because he knows where to stop and let the police go by him so that he can,
Yeah,
and then carry on.
yeah. So stuff like that's really good. I think that it is cool to see the live performances. Honestly, I think it makes the movie unique. I think they had to have thought this movie was going to do better than it did because it really wasn't a commercial success. I mean,
No.
the soundtrack was the only thing that was a commercial success about this movie, and it was also a critical failure as
Yeah.
well. I think it's like 20% on Rotten Tomatoes or something like
Who
that.
cares about Rotten Tomato? Oh wait, we do.
I mean, even though I like the movie, I can't really say that that rating is unwarranted. I mean, like I said, it's not a very well made movie. It feels like
Although it's not a
it
2 out of
feels
10. I mean, we know how the aggregator works, but it's not a 2 out of 10 by any means.
no, I would say, well, I'll get to my rating later.
Yeah.
But it's an aggregate. I mean, it could have been a lot of people giving 2 and 2.5 out of
Yeah.
5s,
Yeah.
which I don't think is unfair.
Yeah.
But I like it, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, Eileen Brennan, she's Cool's mother. She's very hippie-ish. I feel like a lot of drugs were done on this set. Honestly, the whole movie feels very sleazy and kind of like cocaine age-ish, but it's pure at the same time. It just feels very kind of stonerish and stuff, and free spirited and stuff. I'm not saying that they were that way. I wouldn't say.
Look, all the dead ones were massive coke fiends. Anyone who's still alive, we don't think ever did drugs.
Yeah.
I've covered his dead one.
I don't know. I'm not going to make accusations about anybody, but I would not be surprised if there's a lot of debauchery on this set. Because it feels that way. I mean, the way it's paced. It's 1978. You got Steely Dan is your theme song. Like, it feels that way to me. Not to say that it was though, but and I don't know. I think there's some good like filming and cinematography and stuff, which is not surprising because it was actually directed by John Alonzo, who did the cinematography for like Chinatown, which is one of the all-time greats. So obviously you have some talent here too, filmmaking wise.
Forget about it, Jeff. It's Fum Town.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I don't think this is a classic film by any means, but like I said, I think the characters, and there is really just a good message of being there for each other. I mean, like I said, the scene where, Jeff hugs Eric, or how they all band together to help Jeff after he quits, basically, or kind of gets forced to quit, essentially, from the station, which kind of, the movie goes way over the top at that point. There's like people basically like rioting in the streets, and like they're doing "We Will Rock You" in the streets and stuff. It goes way off the deep end, which is fun, also very stonerish. But it's a lot of fun though that they go in that direction. And I think there's some really good moments. I'm not really going to praise the movie because I think it has a lot of flaws to it. I don't think it's an example of high quality cinema by any means.
No, there's a reason why the film is much more obscure than the soundtrack.
Definitely. I mean, it's very weak in the writing department, very weak in the pacing department. Like I said, decently acted though, and decently filmed and stuff. But it's a lot of fun though. I enjoy watching it. I'll probably watch it more in the future. If I'm going to give it a rating, I would probably say a 5 out of 10. I just can't say, oh, it's an 8 out of 10, because it's really not. Like, not even on my enjoyment level, because I think it does get confusing at times story wise, just because of the way it jumps around and stuff. But even as a 5 out of 10, I still think it's fun. I still think it's a good obscure movie from the 70s to check out. If anything, just for the music and to hear Linda Ronstadt do some great stuff live. I mean, that cover of Tumbling Dice she does, I love it.
That cover of Poor Pitiful Me by Warren Zevon.
Yeah, that's really good too, but the Tumbling Dice is better.
No.
But yeah, I'm gonna say a 5 out of 10 today with it. I think it's fun. It's just not a great movie.
I think if someone told me this was a great movie, I'd say clearly you're on more drugs than they were when they were making it. But I'm kind of 99% with you on the parts that you're criticizing on, but I'm a lot more lenient with it. Maybe because I've got a bit more history with it and whatnot. But and Michael Brandon's always been one of my favorites, because I know obviously he did Four Flies and whatnot, and a couple of things in America, but then he moved here and became a TV actor. So Michael Brandon became a big star in the UK. He had a cop show called Dempsey and Makepeace. And it was kind of novelty that this guy who was a bit of a film star in America, not 20 years later, 30 years later, but like literally the year after this, comes over here and starts making TV, a cop show in the UK. So Michael Brandon's always been someone that I've really liked just watching. And he is the core of the film for me, even if he's not quite the heart, because I think Mark Mull's the heart of the film. But Jeff Dugan, played by Michael Brandon, we don't need to do much of a plot thing for anybody, but essentially the army are wanting to advertise on the station. The station is making a fortune, but it's now in this kind of, I guess what we'd now say, kind of superstation conglomerate kind of thing. And their owners have said, you now need to accept big sponsors. You're big enough that you can get monetized to a certain extent, and we want to cash in on that. And Jeff says, well, that's not what we do here. We're kind of scuzzy and lo-fi. Well, I've just figured out why I liked this movie. So he decides, right, okay, we'll deal with this later, because we've got an hour left of the film and we don't want to come to a climax just yet. And that's where it turns into what I think must have been one of Richard Linklater's favorite films when he was growing up, because it becomes a hangout movie, really. Just going through the lives, the loves, the trials of pretty much most of the DJs throughout the day, because it is one of those all happens within a short space. So while they're coming on shift, you start to meet the DJs, and as you say, it starts with Cleavon Little, and probably the funniest scene in the movie actually is him phoning Jeff while he's playing a track and saying, okay, you've got 7 minutes, and then you've got dead air, because I ain't going 1 minute over my shift. Jeff has to scoot down to that station as fast as possible, and he's not angry. You can tell this is just a deal they've got. And everybody's got this different relationship with Jeff, but it's always born out of friendship, respect, love. Everybody likes Jeff, but it never feels like he's written as and you like him just because. It never feels like that kind of character. It feels, and I think it's down to partially the casting of Michael Brandon, that he's just a likable guy. He is a DJ and he's a music fan, and he talks to them about that. So you can see that he's come up from the pits, from the schedules. He still has a show on there sometimes, and he stands in. He's ready. He takes over from Cleavon Little at the start. So he is the kind of core that the film revolves around, even if he's not the heart and soul. And he's the proximate cause of a lot of the events, because he's the one that's saying, no, we're not sellouts, we're not doing this. And what I find fascinating, and the reason I said it's a bit Richard Linklater in that kind of hangout feel, is that it feels like, as a lot of Linklater's films do, it concentrates on the last days of a movement. And in this case, it really is the last kind of shining moments where you can make a film about this kind of radio station. Before it became just, it has to be all programmed. This is the era where the DJs were still literally coming in with their own records and playing exactly what they wanted, and they would have their own fan bases and whatnot. They weren't just relying on playlists. So it really is the last days of Rome when it comes to that kind of thing. They've all got their own idiosyncrasies. Mother plays different kind of tracks from Cleveland Little, and there's a show. One of the parts you didn't talk about is when Doc, Michael Brandon has to let Doc go because he's not pulling in the ratings anymore, and it breaks Michael Brandon's heart to do it. It's another reason why Jeff's such an empathetic and sympathetic character, is that he really doesn't want to let him go. And he's already made calls before he has the conversation with him saying, I'm sorry, we can't sustain your numbers anymore. He's already made calls to get him another job. So you're always on board with Jeff. It does a good job that way, although I don't think the writing in particular is very good. I think the characterization is very good in terms of the individual characters. And you mentioned most of the cast here, but you also get Norman Lloyd, who comes into it at the very end as the guy who ultimately owns the station. And his career is insane because he started with Orson Welles in the 1930s in the theatre before Citizen Kane. And his last credits were like Modern Family and stuff like that. He lived to be like 107 or something like that. It's absolutely insane, the career he had. And he's the old man in the station here, and he was still working in Modern Family like 40 years later nearly. It's kind of nuts. Legendary acting, Norman Lloyd. But really, it's a day in the life kind of movie, a hangout kind of movie, where you're just going to pick up on these little beats and little moments that are going to resonate, because you'll remember, a bit like Almost Famous in a way, you'll remember the song and then the scene that goes with it more than you remember the scene sometimes. It's got that kind of feel as well, where you think, oh, I remember the Lido Shuffle bit, that's the way I think of it more than the actual, like you remember the actual soundtrack. And the soundtrack's interesting too, because as you mentioned, it's obviously full of absolutely iconic tracks. But how ridiculous is it that these weren't iconic tracks at the time, and somebody just had that eye or ear to put this together? I mean, if this was released as a best of the 70s, nobody would have assumed it was anything but that. I mean, it's stone. These have become overplayed, but it was 1978. They weren't. Most of them were brand new tracks. So you mentioned the bands, but you've got like Tom Petty's brand new at the time, Breakdown. Linda Ronstadt's doing the covers, as you mentioned. Lido Shuffle was what, 2 years old at that point? Well, a year old when
I
they
think it
made
was 76.
Yeah, so a year old when they made it. Bob Seger's Night Moves was the same time. That's such a great track. Steely Dan run it twice because they do it again as well. Life's Been Good. Yeah, I could do without Jimmy Buffett. Boston's More Than a Feeling's in here before it became, as you mentioned, Kurt Cobain's favorite song. Dan Fogelberg's in here twice because, it is the 70s and nobody realized he wouldn't date quite that well. Foreigner's Cold as Ice is here, and that was brand new at the time. So, I mean, it's kind of nuts how just on point, whoever the person was who compiled the actual soundtrack itself, they deserved that Grammy. I hope they were the one that ended up with it, not just some corporate person, because wow, to be able to capture a word used on that Kurt Cobain show and the Contrarians a lot, the zeitgeist so perfectly, the FM zeitgeist in one record, from stuff that had not yet become overplayed classics. It was still new music. It's quite remarkable that it was all here. And as I said to you last night, how weird is it that Steely Dan, the only track they ever did, apart from on their own albums ever, is the soundtrack for this. They never did one thing elsewhere, and I looked it up after we spoke to just double check my working. This is literally the only thing they ever did that wasn't on the Steely Dan album. They never recorded anything that they didn't use themselves. There was a B-side of Bodhisattva, but then that was mocked up in the Citizen Steely Dan box set. They never recorded a new track for anything else.
Well, the only other thing that they did was before Steely Dan was a thing. They did.
Oh well, the songwriters, yeah.
Well, they did a soundtrack.
Yeah.
The two of them, yeah.
And you can get those early recordings of. They've been released a million times, and a few of the songs would obviously go on to be repurposed. Like Baddytown and stuff was always on those early stuff.
Yeah, a lot of them were quite lackluster.
Yeah, so they weren't Steely Dan. It was Fagan and Walter at the time, just trying to be a songwriting team.
And I think Denny Diaz, his name was. Yeah.
They were almost, because Donald Fagen at that point still didn't think he could sing at all and didn't want to be a singer. They were quite content to be songwriters. They thought that was their future. They didn't really think they would make it. It was a good backup to be able to be songwriters. So it's kind of nuts that this really obscure movie is the only place that one of the most revered and one of the most beloved audiophile bands has their only outside album appearance ever. It's kind of nuts to think of that. But yeah, terrific soundtrack. And the soundtrack, as you say, soundtracks some wonderfully odd, offbeat stuff. Like We Will Rock You, when it turns into this ridiculously anarchic scene where they've put out the message that hey guys, Jeff Dugan, your beloved Jeff, who's in charge of your favorite station, has been forced out, and this station is going to have to start playing some crap, and we're all going to leave. So what are you going to do about it? And then the whole city turns out to support this radio station. In one of the thankfully Chinatown had slightly better sets. In one of the most obvious studio sets you've ever seen in your life, it looks like the set for Sesame Street. And they've got a riot going on. So it's quite something, but it's funny because of that for me. And when Norman turns up and says, it's okay, you can keep his job, I think, wait a minute, these DJs have violently attacked quite a lot of policemen in the course of this this riot. They've literally turned a fire hose on policemen and knocked them down flights of stairs. And yeah, Jeff does save a policeman's life, though. We have, so it's still, Jeff's the policeman's going to fall off the, actually probably wouldn't have died from that height, but it's FM, so they couldn't afford a higher building. But the guy is going to fall off the second or third story, and Jeff does save the cop. So it's Jeff. He's nice that way. He wouldn't let a cop fall to his death. But it's a wonderfully odd movie because of that, because no two scenes feel quite alike. So you've got scenes like Jeff gently letting down Doc and saying, sorry, there's no place for you anymore, but I love you, you're my friend, you always will be, and I've already made calls, and we're going to get you any job that comes up, you're going to be the first in line, but we're going to get you something sorted right now. You're going to walk into a job, there's no two ways about it. Then we cut to the army stuff, as you mentioned, and then we cut to Martin Mull's gradual breakdown, which on the face of it could be a really sleazy storyline because he's a really sleazy character when you meet him, but then you find out he's got real hang-ups. It's all put on, it's all him, just he's actually a much nicer soul. He lets on, but he wants to be the rock star. I mean, he becomes the rock star for that moment where he gets to introduce Glenn Ronstadt on stage. That's his big moment. And there's almost a kind of used cars feel to that section where it's there's only that one scene where you get the idea that there's other stations that Jeff has this rivalry with, and they foil each other whenever they, so just like in used cars where you have the two used car lots across from each other, and Kurt Russell's team are the good guys, and then you get the bad guys, and they're constantly trying to one up each other. Jeff and Co are trying to steal the headliner, Linda Ronstadt and Jimmy Buffett. They're trying to steal that show and get the sponsorship for that and introduce it and, support our station, not them. We're the one that's got the broadcast, which is funny because now we have all these FM broadcasts that are released as bootlegs officially kind of thing. And this is one of those that we're actually watching in this movie. That's exactly the kind of thing that would come from. So in a way, it's also a kind of cool time capsule for us to see not exactly how these things were, but like just to see an approximation of it from the time, not done years later, but from the time. One of the worst parts of the movie, though, is definitely the pacing. You're right. It doesn't flow well. There are points where Jeff is in a sad, somber mood in one scene, and then the next time you see him, it's a happy, upbeat, magic scene, and you're having a good time. And you think, it does feel like, you're right, an episodic TV show where we're missing some scenes to kind of transition, which we would get with WKRP in Cincinnati, which is a great sitcom, but it's very hard to watch after FM when you know that, oh God, I wish this was Jeff Dugan. I mean, as much as that's a great show in its own right, it's not got quite the same charm, and it's a much more over the top kind of sitcom-y thing. So if anyone is looking for much more of a comedic version, then WKRP is where to go, because this, on the back of the Arrow Blu-ray that we both have, does say something like comedic mayhem ensues, and you just think, not really. It's more of a fun time than any kind of over the top comedy. I mean, there are little funny bits, but to me, it's just it's a perfect example of why we talk about what were these gatefold albums synonymous with back in the day for people. There would always be something in this middle bit that people would be smoking. You can kind of imagine people checking out this movie in exactly that same kind of vibe. It's very much a hangout, and hey, let's get a bit downbeat and have some fun, watch FM. It's not the kind of thing that you'd stick on instead of Blues Brothers. It's not that kind of movie at all. It's not got the energy, and I don't think it was ever supposed to, because nobody's playing it like that. Everybody's playing it with much more heart and conviction. And Eileen Brennan's character, Mother, she's such a well-named character because you can genuinely believe that Mother is this kind of figure for all of them, and it does get a bit silly that she comes back into it to support Jeff and things, but again, it all kind of ties together in that theme of friendship. It just always gives an extra star to things for me, where just this ridiculous band of people come together just to hang out and be friends, and ultimately I think, I'd rather watch that than I'll watch Cynical Nonsense. If this film was made 3-4 years later, when you're into the 1980s and you're really away from the weeds and into the coke, hello. I'm not going to try again, Siri. You can shut up. You know your place. Did you hear her there? Cheek. If this would be in a few years later, you get this kind of corporate feel, and I think it would probably be told from the army's point of view, trying to get the hippies out. But for me, this is a charming film. It isn't a particularly good one, but I'm really glad that it exists. I love Jeff Dugan. Jeff Dugan is one of my favorite characters in 70s cinema. And I don't know why, because it just feels like I know him and I want to be friends with Jeff Dugan. And I need to get a second copy of this, right? I need to get a second copy of this because I want to have my poster for the radio station put up on the wall and framed, because I want to hang out with these guys every single day. Because this is my kind of jam. But objectively, we always say there's the subjective and the objective when we come to do these things. Subjectively, there are times when I've watched this and it might be a 10. But in the cold light of day, I have to say, I'm not going to go as low as a 5. I'm going to go 7 because I think it's still got a lot of charm to it, a lot of great hangout fun. And I love that Linda Ronstadt concert in the middle. If it wasn't Jimmy Buffett doing another little mini concert, I'd be a lot happier. But even then, he's not too bad. He's not the annoying Jimmy Buffett, though. Yeah. But
he's a very tame Jimmy Buffett here.
Yeah. He's not as obnoxious as would become later on. But it's great to see Linda Ronstadt at her peak though, because she doesn't have like concert film or anything from that era. So I wish other acts. Wouldn't it be great if Steely Dan were in this? Like,
I would bump up my rating a bit.
Can you imagine in the 1970s, just after Asia, Steely Dan are in this movie? In fact, wouldn't it be better if with their kind of quirky, offbeat sensibilities, they co-wrote the movie? Yeah, Donald Fagen. In fact, Donald Fagen as Dugan might be quite a fun backcast.
I would probably prefer that. I mean, I love Michael Brandon too, but
it would be amazing. Donald Fagen's got such a cynicism about him that you can imagine him just slapping Martin Mullen walking out. And just when the army make the offer, I can just imagine him going, "How much? Okay, play what you want. As long as you play Babylon Sisters, I'm fine." But yeah, I think we've covered FM. So have you got any closing thoughts about FM or?
Not really. I mean, like I said, I think it's a fun movie, even though I don't think it's good. Check it out. Make up your mind for yourself. Obviously, Davy likes it a little bit more than I do, but also has more history too. I mean, it's a movie I'll definitely be putting on again. I think especially like that baby come back scene just sticks in my head. I mean, I think that scene really hit me there.
Yeah.
And then a couple scenes like that. I think the stuff with Jeff and Eric is my favorite parts of the movie. I think that a couple other things real quick. When I said sleazy, I think like when you do have the scene with Dolores Deluxe, that's a very sleazy scene there. I mean, it just feels like you're going into a porn movie with no scene feels like. So there, and then I think what other final point? I think it's a cool movie. It is a time capsule. It is fun.
That's perfect word for a time capsule. And if someone isn't into this kind of music, I would probably not even slightly recommend it to them. I think they would need to have an appreciation of that kind of 70s scene to even get that from it, because it's of a piece. It's a perfect idea of a cinema flight music pick combination, where if you weren't into this kind of music and it just sounded like, oh god, that bloody song, the film isn't going to be enough alone to save it for you.
I don't think there'd be much of a film there without the soundtrack.
No, or even if it was different, or just a score, for example.
It honestly feels like a long music video at times.
Yeah, I can see that. And one of the weird things about, we've compared it to WKRP. I think they fixed it now, but WKRP, when it was released on DVD, they did, like this, have a great soundtrack on TV, but they didn't have the rights for home video. So for years, WKRP had like this awful temp soundtrack stuff, played on a Casio keyboards, and it was just horrendous. So if you want an idea of how bad it could be, just imagine instead of We Will Rock You, you had just some composer that's is getting paid minimum wage to just sit and just Yeah. So it's the music elevates it, the character creations elevate it, the performances elevate it, probably more than the script deserves and the direction deserves at the end of the day.
Mhm.
But as you said, a time capsule and the kind of movie that if it was made now would be far too idealized. So it's kind of fun that we got one made at the time this was
Oh
still,
yeah.
you know.
It feels, I think it even though it does go over the top at the end, I think a lot of the movie just does feel like you could just be daily life.
Yeah.
And that is kind of cool. I think the end messes with that, but it's almost kind of like a John Landis kind of ending, like real
Yeah.
crazy shit at the end,
Well, yeah, that's why
which
I
is kind of
mentioned
cool.
used cars, because have you seen used cars with Kurt Russell?
Oh
Where,
yeah.
they have literally 50, 60 cars have to be driven back to the car lot in the space of 10 minutes, or they're going to lose the place. And, it turns into just like the car chase at the end of the Blues Brothers by John Landis. So it does have this kind of weird anarchy ending, which is so out of place for the rest of the film. But I'm kind of glad it's there because it's just so mental nuts. That I mean, you're getting to watch Cleavon Little and Eileen Brennan fire hose and cops and knocking them down flights of stairs. I mean, it's like, what am I watching here? This is fantastic. Well, Boz
Definitely.
Scaggs serenade you or something. It's like, well, this will do.
Toledo. Oh.
Yeah, Lido Shuffle. Wow. Um, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
He's for the money. He's for the job. Should be called Jeff Shuffle. So we've covered both of them. Next month, we're going to be covering. Do you mind if I say what we're covering next month?
Go for it.
We're covering Phantom of the Paradise by Brian De Palma, starring Paul Williams, and that guy who plays Winslow. I can never remember his name. But Paul Williams plays Faust in it and is one of the most fun musical operas of the 70s, rock operas. So a nice Halloweeny pick for us to be able to combine both.
Jessica Harper too, right?
Jessica Harper's in there, yeah, from
Yep, from
a
Suspiria.
lot of the Argento connections that we're accidentally making. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so we'll come to that next month. And Paul Williams does the soundtrack just about the same time he writes The Rainbow Connection. Bit different. Anyway, we'll wrap up. Ryan, would you like to plug any of your upcoming content?
Let me think here. Coming up soon, I've got Queen series starting. We'll be looking at the whole catalog. I got Zero the Hero with Davy, which him and I have been working really hard on. We'll be doing the movie One Missed Call. I'll be releasing it on Halloween, so make sure to check in for that.
And then there's even more exciting content that can't tell you yet.
Yeah, there's tons of other stuff, but
Yeah.
why tell you all now? Just
Yeah,
go
it's not.
subscribe and you'll find out.
That's it. You hit the subscribe button. Not on here, on Ryan's channel. If you subscribe here to watch the Queen series, you're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah, it's RYAN apostrophe S VINYLDESTINATION. Ryan's Vinyl Destination.
Yeah. This show was brought to you by the letters RYAN. Yeah, right, okay. Apostrophe, yeah. I will, of course, link to Ryan's channel. But if you have been watching this one and you haven't already subscribed, first of all, what the fuck? And second of all, come on. Come on.
Come on.
Yeah. Like, seriously, if you like what I do here, I'm over there anyway, so you may as well be over there with me because we have nuts times over there. Some of it's even more nuts. Maybe not more nuts than what happened on this channel yesterday, but still, it's a good time, folks. Even if I'm not going to be on the Queen series, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yep.
It's not going to be that good. I'll do my own one. Yeah. So I will link to Ryan and his wonderful content. I'll even stick a link into George the Revenge, Zero the Hero. Possibly the greatest thing that's ever happened to YouTube. I'm not terribly sure. It's definitely in the top one.
I think so.
Ryan, thank you very much for joining me, my friend. It is never a chore, always a privilege.
True that. Thank you, Davy. It's always a good time.
Thank you. I'm glad one of us had a good time. So, folks, stay very safe out there, and we're covering this in 2 months, so it works for a change. Love and mercy.
Love and mercy.
Yeah, do it.
Love and mercy is what you need tonight.
Right, we could do the Dylan Nashville Skyline, but right here, love and mercy is what you need tonight.
It really scared me.
Sitting in a crummy movie, my hands on my chin. Folks, if you don't know why we're doing Dylan impressions, again, go to Ryan's channel to find out why. We're not going to tell you here. This is a mystery box. Only unlike J.J. Abrams, this is good content as well. Ryan, thanks again. Love and mercy to you, my friend. I appreciate you.
Love and mercy to you too.
Thank you. Folks, more content coming soon. Whatever it is, I'll decide about 10 seconds before I make it, but I'll see you when I see you.